Right, lots to get into. Sky News editor Andrew Clennell joins me now. Andrew, we want to start, please, if we can, this defence review handed to the PM. We saw those pictures there with, I'll call him General Houston. I remember him as General, but he's Sir Angus Houston now. That report has landed. Of course, we don't know a lot of the material in it yet. Of course, government will respond in the usual way. But you've got some intelligence based on what you've seen already reported in the UK. Give us a sense of what's out there.
Well, it's a report in The Sun, Peter, and it's intriguing because it talks about jobs in the UK. So it doesn't rule out nuclear submarines partly being constructed here, but it indicates a couple of them might be constructed in the UK of the AUKUS nuclear submarines. So that was in The Sun on the weekend. And we're expecting Anthony Albanese to travel to America for an announcement potentially next month to meet Joe Biden and Rishi Sunak there. The Americans haven't locked it in yet. But I think a bit of the cat's out of the bag here in terms of there'll be some British building of these submarines, at least some of them. And I think Scott Morrison promised 8. So, and it might be US nuclear propulsion that goes into them. So that's how you end up with the AUKUS. But surely the submarines are a big part of this Defence Strategic Review itself. And surely it requires vastly more spending on defence, taking it up from 2% of GDP to as much as 3 or 4. And surely we'll see that in the May budget, which is why they need to get this review out now. But it was kind of interesting and pretty staged, wasn't it, to see, you know, we had a press conference, we're doing this review, now a press conference, we're handing over this review. Where's the review?
Oh, as a former staff who liked a bit of staging myself, I can't possibly comment. Give me a sense, though, are we going to see, do you think, a formal response from the government about this review before budget, or will we see it come out on budget night?
Oh, I think it'll be before budget. I think the government's kind of made that clear. They're ticking off boxes. They'll do the review, they'll do AUKUS in that order, is my understanding. And that will give them a month and a half before budget or so.
Senate estimates, I always like this time in the parliamentary cycle because things get found out that we would normally know without a bit of probing. One of the things you've picked up this morning is the Curry gas plant in the Hunter. Incredibly important, particularly as coal-fired power goes off out of New South Wales in the coming months. What can you tell us?
Well, it was $600 million when it was promised by Angus Taylor. It's blown out to $765 million. There's some doubt that Labor will be able to deliver on its promise to have it supplied by hydrogen or a percentage of hydrogen, and it's been delayed by a year. So it will only be fully in operation, the officials told Senate estimates, at the end of next year. It was supposed to be the end of this year. So some hiccups along the way in terms of that project, and there was speculation that when Paul Broad left Snowy Hydro, part of it was his disagreements with Chris Bowen, the Energy Minister, about whether or not you could or should use hydrogen in the plant. So watch this space, because it is a very important project, okay? It's just a gas-fired power station, but the Liddell coal-fired power station is closing, and you're going to see similar problems to we had a few years ago in Victoria and South Australia if they're not careful. We're talking blackouts, we're talking price rises unless they get this thing up and running. So it's already delayed. The cost is blowing out. It's going to be a story in the next couple of years, Peter.
And I remind people at home, of course, the owner of Liddell, AGL, refused to sell it to anyone else to keep it going until there was sufficient baseload capacity in the system. I think they've got an application in, if I'm right, Andrew, to blow it up. Let's stay with estimates. ABC Managing Director David Anderson, he fronted this morning. He was grilled over the ABC's recent reporting in relation to Alice Springs. This is this town hall meeting, total white supremacist fest, a scary vibe. They were the sort of quotes there on the ABC. Here was Anderson's response when questioned.
I think it's utterly disgraceful that this sort of ongoing behaviour is allowed to continue.
I didn't think it was relevant, given that Ms Williams, filed a report for 7 o'clock news that night that did have all the perspectives in it, and so
it's not relevant. I mean, Mr. Anderson, if I had put that excuse up when I was a reporter at the ABC, I would have been hounded out of my job.
It comes, of course, as the ABC's independent ombudsman Fiona Cameron found the network had breached its own editorial guidelines of accuracy and impartiality in the same report. So where to now?
Well, it looks like a rap on the knuckles, if anything, for the reporter. But I do see one positive out of this, Peter, and that is that traditionally the ABC and their complaints processes have always knocked back the complaints, no matter what was done. Now they have this independent ombudsman who's made a finding against the report. And I think that's at least a positive development, that we've got a situation where if they do the wrong thing, they're able to admit it. And I'll tell you what, that's an improvement on where they were 3 or 4 years ago. Long way to go.
Yeah. These reports need to come down, though. When there's been a contestability about the veracity of what's in the reports, they need to come down until the umpire, in this case Fiona Cameron their own independent ombudsman, finalises the report. And in the case of this, where she finds there was breaches of editorial codes, well, the report doesn't go back unless it remediates what she's found to be at fault. But that's not what's happened. We know that report's been living online since the time it went to air, and it compounds this sort of error, Andrew. You wouldn't do that at Sky.
No,
I mean, if there's anything that's been called into question, it comes down.
And the private sector, seem to be a lot tougher on these things.
Same.
In the media. It's as simple as that. I mean, there's a commercial imperative.
Let's go to the CCTV story. The Chinese-made cameras, 1,000 of them, we're told, all over locations in Canberra. Further development today, though, officials from the Department of Finance, which runs, obviously, the offices of MPs and ministers around the country, 88 of these Chinese cameras are in the offices of MPs. I mean, this is just going from bad to worse.
Yes, well, James Patterson, he certainly belled the cat on this one, and he's had some success. So I suspect there'll be more stories along these lines, and there'll be more removals. The government acted pretty lightning quick, I've got to say. That they obviously can see the dangers in it and the concerns about it and how bad a story it is for them. We're talking about spending hundreds of billions on national security and submarines and the like. You want to get your own shop cleaned up first.
Just before we go, you've been around a long time in Canberra. There was always this protocol that the independence of the Reserve Bank was respected on all sides of politics. They've got it guaranteed there at an active parliament. But there was a real pile-on today from a front bencher. It felt to me when Stephen Jones was attacking the Reserve Bank that it had the imprimatur of people higher up, I say the Treasurer, perhaps even the Prime Minister in his office. That's unusual, isn't it?
It is, and I can't speak to that because I haven't inquired as to whether that imprimatur has occurred. He could be just a loose unit, Stephen Jones. So that's something worth me inquiring, let's put it that way. But look, I think everyone expects Philip Lowe not to be renewed. And it's an interesting little shuffle Jim Chalmers is doing around at the moment, denying he's made a decision. I find that very hard to believe. And it's an uncomfortable situation because you do have to respect the independence of the Reserve Bank, as you say. But the Reserve Bank review will be telling.
Well, you need to...
I mean, what changes will Jim Chalmers make?
Well, I think we need them to fix the problems.
Yeah, well, he's foreshadowed it.
I think we need them to fix the problems before we move them on.
Oh, Philip Lowe, you mean? Yeah, well, he's got another 6 months, so there you go.